Who is more responsible for the current NBA product? Is it Kevin Durant for choosing the Warriors and taking the intrigue out of the season? Do you blame LeBron for choosing the Heat, making super teams? Or is it Sam Hinkie for starting the process and having other teams accept losing? Why is the product currently in the state that it's in, where, quite frankly, it doesn't seem like people care all that much about the NBA playoffs and finals? We all just think it's going to be the Warriors. It's going to be the Warriors, which means the Warriors have got to be the best team of all time, right? They've won 3 out of 4. But why does Golden State fall short of the all-time greats? We asked Mitch Lawrence, who writes about this at Forbes, and you can hear him on SiriusXM NBA Radio, which I do quite often, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Welcome back, Mitch.
Well, before we get to that, gentlemen, and good afternoon, thanks for having me on.
Always.
You know, your question misses a big point. Now, remember, before Durant left Oklahoma City for Golden State, the salary cap exploded. Remember that?
Yes.
There was all that extra money.
For like 2 years.
From the TV
for
money.
1 year. It was the summer of whenever, Durant went, 16 or 17, whenever that was. And so that's the only reason Golden State was able to offer him a huge deal, because there was this one-time explosion in the cap, and that was done by basically, the league and the players accepted all that. So, when people blame the Warriors go, hey, the cap went up, we did what we had to do, but that's a once in a blue moon type of thing. So it was the system that they took advantage of. And that really is the reason. Otherwise, they couldn't have signed Kevin Durant unless he went there for peanuts. So you got to remember that. But anyway.
Well, indirectly then.
How are you?
I did see that the Warriors, the ownership group, said that they've been getting a lot of, heat for signing LeBron, right? I mean, was that something that was out there that he came out and said that they've been getting a lot of people coming after them about that?
About going after LeBron now?
No, going after Durant.
Oh, please. Who would you rather have, Harrison Barnes or Kevin Durant? I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Well,
they just took advantage of the system, but it was that one-time spike in the cap that allowed them to have the financial wherewithal, and that's really what has turned this into a non-competitive situation. More non-competitive than we've seen, because they're basically head and shoulders. All right, you could argue Houston. I mean, Houston won 3 games. They might have beaten it without Chris Paul. But, the Cleveland thing's a joke. They're head and shoulders above everybody.
Mitch, that deal was from the TV deal, too, right? That was the 9-year, $24 billion media deal.
Right. And they didn't want to smooth it out over time. They wanted a one-time thing. So who knew that this was going to change the whole landscape? But it did. The Warriors took advantage of it. Good for them. Now, now we're seeing the problem with it, because, it looks like, who's the oldest guy in that team? Curry or Durant? They're like 30 years old. Their guys are in their prime. Unless there's an injury, unless Klay Thompson all of a sudden decides he's going to leave, you're going to have their main 4 guys stick around for the next few years. I don't know who can beat them. Obviously things come up, injuries, etc. But it really looks like it's a rigged system right now for the Warriors.
By the way, it was the Golden State ownership group said, quote, "I felt really personally persecuted by other NBA owners after signing Kevin Durant." Almost like they said, hey, you've ruined our product.
Well, that's nonsense. He's got to do what he's got to do. Plus, you got to remember, it's a great business move for the Warriors, because they're moving into that new arena. They're going to sell PSLs. They're going to have, all kinds of top dollar seats and suites and stuff. You have to have, you're opening up a brand new arena in San Francisco. You got to have the stars to have these big time tech people come out and drop a ton of money there. So they're going to have, they're going to fill that building, and they'll have the requisite star power to do it.
So Mitch Lawrence is with us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline, and he writes, why Golden State championship falls short of the all-time greatest. So why aren't we putting them up there with the rest?
Well, in my mind, you got to have a couple things, guys. First of all the all-time great teams. If you're an all-time great team, it stands to reason you got to have iconic players. I'm not talking about all-stars. I'm not talking about all NBA players. I'm talking about guys who are Mount Rushmore candidates. So if you're a team like the Lakers of the 80s with Magic and Kareem, you got a couple of icons. You got some guys who are Mount Rushmore guys. If you're the Bulls of the 90s, obviously you have Michael Jordan. You could argue Scottie Pippen's a top 50 player of all time. The Celtics of the 60s, they wrote the book on how to build dynasties. They won 11 in 13 years, 11 titles. They had an icon in Bill Russell. any recent teams have icons. I really didn't talk much about the Lakers of the Shaq, Kobe, although they are iconic because if you go by position, that's the other thing. You know, if you're going to have a team, you want to argue Golden State is an all-time team. Do they have icons? I'd argue no. Curry and Durant are not icons. Are they going to be top players at their position when all the dust settles? How good? I mean, you know, Magic Johnson's the top point guard. Kareem is one of maybe the top center, if not the top. Is Curry or Durant going to be a top 3-4 player at his position? You know, Durant's problem is he's a small forward. He's not even the best small forward of his era. That's LeBron James by a mile. And then there's Larry Bird. So, you know, you can argue third at best if it's not Dr. J or Rick Barry or Elgin Baylor like that. And Curry's got to worry about, you know, how he's competing now. You're competing against Magic and Oscar Robertson. And there's some people who still think Isaiah Thomas or John Stockton. So if you're going to try to argue for them, it's not just the 3 titles in 4 years. It's what is the makeup of your team. Do you have the iconic players? Do you have the guys who are on the Mount Rushmore? And sorry, but they don't have that now.
No, that's an interesting you know, debate there, though. I mean, I like it.
Well, here's the thing. Well, I mean, if you're talking about the all-time greatest teams, you just like here's the thing about the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq. They did win 3 in a row. They did go to 4 finals in 5 years. That's not a real great – I mean, that's not a long time. You know, Jordan at least got 6 titles, and I mean, he owned the 90s. So for the Lakers' standpoint, yeah, you can argue, well, they got 2 icons because Kobe's probably the number 2 shooting guard of all time behind Michael, and Shaq is a top 5 all-time center if you're looking at, obviously, Kareem and Russell and Wilt. And, you know, some people think Akeem, but Shaq's got to be up there, right? Well, they're iconic players. They've got more iconic players in Kobe and Shaq than the Warriors do. But their length of time together, you know, that's the problem there. Now, that's why the Warriors you got to kind of hold off on because they have more time here. Obviously, Durant's not going anywhere. We'll see how many more titles and MVPs Curry gets. I'd like to see Curry get a Finals MVP one of these days. That would help the cause. He doesn't have that, so you have to keep that in mind. And let's talk about the Bird Celtics of the '80s too. Now they only won 3 titles, but you know Larry Bird won 3 MVPs in a row, and you know, 5 MVPs totals, including the Finals MVPs in like a 6-7 year span. So they were obviously a dominant team. So there are only a handful of those teams. I don't even include the Spurs. Even though they had an iconic player in Duncan, to me they just didn't have enough. Yes, 5 titles over what they went from 99 to 14. So they did have a tremendous run. But you're talking about the all-time teams. Never went back-to-back. That's the thing the Warriors have. At least they've went back-to-back. So they got some things in there, you know, going for them. But you need to me, you got to have some Mount Rushmore people. They don't have those.
I really it's a great article, by the way. Check it out at Forbes.com. He really lays that out. And when you say that, you know, I've been accused of being too tough on Curry, saying, look, I don't know that Curry – you know, you mentioned he hasn't won the Finals MVP.
That's surprising to me. I mean, I think he thought he was going to walk out of there, Mitch, with that MVP trophy, and then they went to KD again.
He shot his way out of contention for me. Game 3, the 3 for 16 deal. Right. Guys, you know what? You're a Finals. I don't remember Jordan. I don't remember Magic. I don't remember Bird having a 3 for 16 night. I mean, come on. You want to be considered an all-time great? You cannot do that. And by the way, Kevin Durant's night that night, I believe, wasn't it Game 3, where he had the 43. Man, that's his crowning achievement. To me, that's even better than the performances he put on last year. So Curry's got a lot of work to do in the Finals. He's had some ups. He's had a lot of downs. And that 3 for 16, to me, he took himself right out of contention.
Real quick on that, we debated last week which guy you would pick, Curry or Durant, to start your team with.
Well, Durant's the better all-around player, but Curry is more important to the Warriors. I guess you'd have to say Durant, probably. I mean, look.
It's hard.
Durant's a 4-time scoring champ. Curry's won 1 scoring title. Now, Curry's won 2 MVPs. You know, to me, a guy who's Durant's size, he's got an unblockable shot, basically. You have to almost go with him, I would think.
Yeah, it's funny, Mitch, because we split in the room even 2-2, and the people on the Curry side, at least I threw out, that with Curry, the marketability, the when he does get in that assassin mode and the daggers and the shots from all over the court, you know, that excites a fan base.
Yeah, you know what? It's very close because Curry, got to remember now, he did win a title and 73 games before Durant got there, right? So you have to take that into consideration. And Steve Kerr might argue Curry. They all talk that Curry's the more important thing because offensively he makes them the most unique team. And also, you got to remember, you want to pick Durant to start your team. How'd that work out in Oklahoma City? Now, they did get to a finals. They also blew a 3-1 lead with a Russell Westbrook, and Durant had a lot to do with that, too.
So, Mitch, you write on Forbes about the Warriors. Don't call them the GOAT yet, but what if they were to win 4 in a row? Would that elevate their status?
No, because in my mind, you're still the big problem is going to be Curry and Durant, where they rank all time at their positions. Are they ever going to be Mount Rushmore players? I mean, it's just going to be hard to knock off the Magic. To equal Magic and Kareem, to equal the Boston front line with Bird, Parrish, and McHale. And by the way, 3 top 50 players, to equal what Michael Jordan did. That's going to be very, very hard, because we're talking about, people talk about great. I'm not using that word. I'm using iconic. I'm using guys who, just think about Kobe and Shaq. They're more iconic than Durant and Curry, aren't they?
I suppose so.
There's no doubt.
Definitively.
They're some of the top players at their position in the history of the league. That's what I'm saying.
Kobe gets
these guys are not. I don't see Curry ever moving up past Oscar Robertson. Myself, maybe is an outside shot. Yeah, if he wins some more MVPs and scoring titles and rings, okay. You still got Magic Johnson there. He'll never be in my mind. He's never going to be the number 1 point guard. And Durant, I don't know if he can top Larry Bird, and he's not going to top LeBron James at this point. He's an outlier. He's a 6'11" guy with tremendous moves and a tremendous, unblockable shot. But please, you're talking Larry Bird and LeBron James. They're not in the same stratosphere as Kevin Durant.
And you write that if they had a 3rd Hall of Famer, that might help their cause.
Well, here's the problem, guys. It's almost like you can't use the Hall of Fame anymore. You almost have to use – they're going to come out – the league's going to come out, I'm sure, with the top 75 list, and that's where you're going to get the guys who didn't make it in 96, who played after 96, guys like Duncan, guys like Kobe, guys like Iverson. They're going to make that team. Hall of Fame, the problem is, ever since they put Mitch Richmond in, and it wasn't his fault, he got voted in, the bar is very low. So now you got guys like Tracy McGrady going in on the first ballot, which is absurd. The Warriors, now, when I talk to people out in Golden State on the radio, they're insisting they got 4 Hall of Famers. I see 2, locks in Durant and Curry. Klay Thompson has an argument only because it's been diluted. He's had a Hall of Fame moments, as I write. At Oklahoma City win in Game 6, back when they were down 3-1, and, when he made 11 threes, that's a Hall of Fame moment. That's historic stuff. He's had other great moments, too. Draymond Green just doesn't score enough. He's not a good enough shooter for me to be a Hall of Famer. So, obviously, you can have a debate on that. They've got 2 locks, though. We all know, in this day and age, Curry and Durant are automatic.
Mitch, when you were talking about Steph Curry and the MVPs, you talk about Bird winning 3 MVPs. Couldn't you argue, though, that the overall talent in the league, in the NBA at that point, wasn't as deep as it currently is now?
Well, I don't know if you were around in the 80s, but if you saw Larry Bird play then.
Have you seen this man?
Yeah, I was around. I was a very impressionable 9-year-old.
Well, for a guy to win, I think winning 3 MVPs has only been done a couple of times, if I'm correct. And I can't remember if it was, I think it might have been Kareem. Larry Bird was the best player in the league with Magic Johnson, with still a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, with a Moses Malone. I could go on and on and on. It's just not scoring, it's passing. The Celtic team, you got to remember, the 86 team is considered maybe the best team. Now, that is, he's, to me, that's his argument for Mount Rushmore. So, no, Larry Bird, to pull that off in that era was, and still is, maybe one of the most amazing feats in the history of the sport. Maybe Bill Russell, by the way, might have won 3. I can't remember, but Larry Bird, that Celtic team, and I only just won 3 titles, but you got to remember what they were going up against too. That team out in L.A.
We're talking with Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio. You can also read him at Forbes and the Sporting News, and he's, of course, always kind enough to join us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. And, he talks about the Warriors and whether or not they're one of the all-time greats. The point you make about the players is a good one. Like, I'm very difficult grader. I don't like, some of these all-star level players becoming Hall of Famers and that kind of stuff. To me, there is LeBron, and then there's Durant, and there's a separation there, and then maybe Kawhi and Curry. That group. But people always say, how do you not have Curry in that? I said, I don't know that Curry. I think he's in the perfect situation. But if Curry goes to another team, and he's the best player on that team by a long shot, is that team's whole makeup changing? Are they like all of a sudden an automatic title contender?
No, because that's the LeBron formula, right? I mean, that's the thing about LeBron. He leaves Cleveland and become a lottery team. He goes to Miami, they become a championship team. All right, they're with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. Then he goes back to Cleveland, takes a lottery team, turns them into an automatic championship team. That's the difference, you know. And so, I mean, Curry's an awesome offensive player. But look, let's break it down too. Does he do a lot of other things? Yeah, the Golden State people tell you, well, you know, the way he spreads the floor and this. He's a shooter. He's might be the greatest long distance shooter we've seen. And you saw it in the finals, but he just doesn't do enough all-around things for me to be considered in that. I mean, you're talking LeBron does just about everything. Now the problem with LeBron guys is, I mean, look, you can't go smacking a whiteboard. You can't go doing that and basically, you know, hurting your team's cause. I know they weren't going to win anyway, but how dumb a move was that by a guy who considers himself the most intelligent player in the sport? I will say this, and the other thing too, disappointing thing besides that and all the ramifications that entail, guys, in the second half when he took 3 shots and he had 4 fouls, he basically unplugged himself. Mm-hmm. We've seen that before from LeBron. We saw it from LeBron when he was in Cleveland the first time against Boston. We saw it in the finals against Dallas. Let me tell you something. People want to know what the difference between Michael Jordan and LeBron James is. I watched Michael Jordan play most of his playoff games, if not all, some in person, a lot on TV, a lot in person. He never did that. He never quit on his team.
The anniversary is today for the Jordan flu game.
He never at all did that. Now, I was working yesterday on the air at Sirius, and my co-host, Noah Kozlov, said to me, as I was saying this and telling people, look, you can never accuse Michael Jordan. He always went down with a fight. He always went down competing. He always went down trying to do his most and his best to get his team to win. Didn't always – in the 80s, believe me, it didn't always work. Once he got to the 90s, he couldn't lose. And Noah said to me, well, here's the game against Boston. He was 9 for 30. I said he took 30 shots. That's the deal. He took 30 shots. He always went down swinging. That's the disappointing thing about LeBron. You have these moments where he quits on his team. You want to be compared to Michael Jordan? That's where he falls short.
Yeah, you know, it's such a tough situation for him because, you know, we just asked a question about Curry and if he went to another team. You could put LeBron on the Knicks and they're probably at least an Eastern Conference contender, right?
No doubt.
He's the only player in the league that, regardless of the team he goes to, they are in contention. And that's to his credit and detriment because he takes teams that don't have the talent and they come up short.
He's an amazing player, and still at this age, 33, what he can do is phenomenal. It's just that he has these moments occasionally where he does this stuff at the end of these series where he's not going to win, where – man, you just shake your head and you go, what was he doing? Why didn't he go down with a fight? He was mentally exhausted. He was physically exhausted. Okay, fine. But still, that doesn't excuse the performance. And that obviously doesn't excuse what he did at the end of that game. As crushing as that loss was, you can't go in and you can't smack a whiteboard and then, you know, hurt your hand and then basically, you know, that's the series right there.
Well, and you tell you what, if you watch those last couple games, he was not shooting the three, not nearly as much as he did in that first game.
No, didn't do. I mean, look, he had, like I said, second half, 17 minutes of game 4, he got 4 fouls. He took 3 shots. That's not cutting it. That's not going down with a fight. That's what you have to do. You have to do that because otherwise, that's when, you know, people look and they go, you know, what is this guy doing? I mean, that's what we want to see from a guy who fancies himself as, you know, one of the most intelligent players and one of the all-time greats. So very, very, I'll tell you what, in terms of his finals and his playoff resume and stuff, this is one of those losses that hurts just beyond the loss because of what he did to himself and how he went out with a kind of a whimper, not a bang in this series.
All right, Mitch, here we are, the Warriors, and they're the favorite again next year. So 2018, what are we thinking about the current product?
Well, guys, this is the way the NBA rolls. I mean, except for the 70s where you had multiple winners, this is the way the decades are usually. This is the way, you know, it unfolds, and it's unfortunate for some teams and a lot of teams, and it's great for these Warrior fans who – I mean, the Warrior fans are still punching themselves. They can't believe it. If you look at their history, they hadn't done much until this last go-round with Curry, so they're loving it. But this is the way it's going to be. But I will say this. I mean, I'm still intrigued by what a team like Houston is going to do in the offseason because if Chris Paul doesn't get hurt, they might have won that series. I'm not saying they would have, but they had a good chance. I mean, they were up 3-2. Chris Paul was the best player on the floor in those games where they tied the series and went up 3-2. So, yeah, I mean, that's the history of the league. The league is you get a couple of contenders. You might have one powerhouse or two powerhouses, and you got 25, 28 teams that are just sitting there going,
why do you think
we might make the playoffs, but we don't have a shot.
Why do you think we're so much more than fixated on? Because I agree with you that back in the Jordan era, there was about 4 teams that we thought could potentially challenge them. That was it. So why today do we view the product so much differently when it was really, you're right, it was really, there's never been like 10 teams that were really in contention?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the league is every day is a referendum on the league on social media, right? So you have that. There's all this stuff out there that people are constantly writing on the internet. Is it good? Is it bad? Why wasn't there the hue and cry in the 90s? In the 90s, there wasn't social media. There was just, regular talk shows, newspapers, TV. So that's the thing. The other thing, too, is we got into it earlier, is that you had an MVP player in his prime, in Kevin Durant, pick up from a title contender in Oklahoma City, ruin that team basically when he left. They're not a title contender anymore. They struggled to get home court in the first round. And then he goes to a team that's a champion. So that also adds to this whole thing because, when was the last time a guy was an MVP in his prime? Took, obviously LeBron, but, this is Kevin Durant joining Steph Curry. And so, yeah, it makes it a lot more obvious and a lot more like, how are we going to get out of this, especially when you've got these guys who are the 4 Golden State players are guys who are going to be back here year after year after, 4 or 5 years they could be together. So I think those are the things that really factor into it.
Mitch Lawrence, best fit where they'll go, all right? The best fit for LeBron and where he'll end up going.
Well,
they could be different. They could be different.
I'm thinking, and I'm just saying this because I've been saying it from day one. I think he's going to the Lakers. I think it's all about his family, like he says, and he's got a couple homes out there, and his offices out there, and he's got his base of operations out there. And so it may not be the best fit. Quite frankly, what is the best fit if you're going up against Golden State? You're going to be 2 at best, probably, right? But I think the Lakers are the best fit. You got Magic Johnson to work with. You're going to have a very how should I put this? LeBron obviously carries a lot of weight in what he says and what he wants to do and what he wants the front office to do, as we've seen in Cleveland. He didn't get that type of treatment in Miami. That's why I'm not buying the Spurs thing at all. They don't run their team that way where they defer. They want everybody to get with the program and fall in line, and that's not LeBron. I think Magic Johnson and Jeannie Buss would welcome the opportunity to work with LeBron James because they're desperate to become a championship team again. They're used to winning championships. They're used to getting the big free agents like they got LeBron, Shaq a few, back in whenever that was, 98, 2000, whenever that was, back in the day when he left Orlando. So I think from their standpoint, it'll be the best fit. And from LeBron's, family-wise and basketball-wise, I think he can't ask for anything more. Sorry, Philadelphia.
What about Paul George?
Oh, I never bought for a minute. I'm still not buying it. I said from the day that trade was made from Indiana, I said Oklahoma City is a way station. He will spend one season there, and he's on his way to play with LeBron in L.A. Oh. Now, is that going to happen? I still look at it as that's Paul George. Early in his Indiana career, he's talking about being a Laker privately. That's the thing. He wants to go back home. So I'd be shocked. I'd be really shocked if Paul George stayed in Oklahoma City. There's no reason for him to. He has a champion. He has the opportunity to go home. He has the opportunity maybe to play with LeBron James when LeBron is still playing at a high level. If you're Paul George, you're going to stay in Oklahoma City for what?
That's 0 for 2, by the way, if you're keeping score.
What happens with Chris Paul?
You think that Paul George can play in Philadelphia? He's got no. Is that saying 0 for 2? He's got no connection in Philadelphia. 0. Who'd you mention? Who's the next name?
What's going to happen with Chris Paul?
Oh, I think Houston's going to open up the vault for him. It'll probably be a mistake. You can't give Chris Paul more than 3 years. It's been 4. He had 4 straight years in the playoffs, including this year, where he got hurt. He either got knocked out or he got physically. He got injured and he got. It hindered him. So yeah, I can't give more than 3 years. I mean, guys, you're talking about a deal which would pay him like $46 million when he's 38 years old in the fifth year of a max deal.
Can't do it.
Can't do that. You got to pay him 3 years, about 150, whatever it is. Just make sure it's 3 years. But I think obviously he's key for Houston because Houston wants LeBron James, and it's not going to be Daryl Morey who recruits him. It's not going to be Mike D'Antoni who recruits him. Chris Paul's best friends with LeBron James. That's the guy you want recruiting him. Nobody else.
Ooh, what happens with DeMarcus Cousins? That's a tricky one.
Well, the Pelicans are going to look to re-sign him, but only because it's a Achilles injury, which is always very tricky for these guys. They're only going to look to sign him for 2 years probably. 2 years, $44 million, something in that range. He's not going to get max money. You hear about him and the Lakers. I don't know if the Lakers are going to make a big move for him off this Achilles. I could see him staying. I've always heard he wanted to play on the West Coast, so I could see him going to L.A. That obviously would factor into how you're going to now. You got 2 max money slots. How's that going to affect Paul George? You still have to bring LeBron out there. So maybe he doesn't end up with the Pelicans. Maybe he leaves, but I think the Pelicans will make him an offer. It's not going to just be for the money that he thought he was going to get. Remember, before he left Sacramento, he thought he was going to get a $205 million deal. He's not going to get anything close to that now.
And then the Kawhi Leonard situation. Now, he's saying today, I 100% want to stay here. So,
well, I guess he does because he thinks he's going to make $200 million. I just don't know how the Spurs, after that whole season where there's so much contentiousness between the two sides, how they're going to kiss and make up. I guess anything's possible, right? So I guess he'd be back. The other thing, too, is if you want to trade him, I know there are a lot of teams who would want him. I think there might be some teams that have a little concern about what happened this past year. They'd have to check that out. But from the standpoint of is he healthy and okay, should be by now, I would hope. With that leg, you'd have to give up a lot for him, and I just don't know if the Spurs can get what they could get for Kawhi Leonard in terms of equal value. So, yeah, I guess he'll be back, and with LaMarcus Aldridge. But like I said before, I know it's been reported Greg Popovich is interested. I just don't know how Greg Popovich all of a sudden is going to change his ways and he's going to acquiesce to a superstar like a LeBron James, because LeBron James, when you sign him, they know in Cleveland, you've got to be able, you know that he's going to tell you exactly what he wants. He's going to make demands on the rosters, maybe the roster, maybe even the coach. I don't see the Spurs doing that.
All right, he's Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio. Forbes, the Sporting News, longtime NBA writer at Mitch_Lawrence, and you can check him out there. And, of course, he was kind enough to join us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thank you, Mitch.
Appreciate it, guys. Good talking.